want to introduce you all to a different way to play Magic the Gathering, a way that I discovered by accident. Literally, I was sitting in a Waffle House after going to one of my local game stores, and I overheard another content creator friend of mine talking at a different Waffle House booth about this pilot vehicle format. And, well, yeah, the format is called pilot, and you use vehicles a lot. I thought it was really interesting, so I inquired further. I found out that the format is actually a brainchild of Valerie Fatality and her Fatalist Discord server. And in that server, several rules have been ironed out for a new format for playing Magic. The rules are all available in a living document that you can find on the Pilot Vehicle Magic the Gathering Twitter or Blue Sky account, but the basics of the format are that you have an 80-card deck, unlike Commander's 100-card decks, and instead of one commander, you have a pilot and a vehicle. The color of your deck is based on the color identity of your combined pilot and vehicle, and you can have any vehicle you want so long as it's got a crew cost, and you can have any pilot you want so long as it has a numerical value on its power that is equivalent to the crew cost of the vehicle. So a vehicle with a crew cost of 1 could be crewed by a Llanowar Elf, for instance. A vehicle with a crew cost of 2 could be crewed by a Grizzly Bears, for instance. There is no limitation on your pilot being a legendary creature. You can have any creature whatsoever and any vehicle whatsoever in combination so long as that crew cost is there. And once you've combined the two together, that is the color identity of your deck. So if you have a red-green creature and a blue vehicle, you now have a red-green-blue teamer deck. Cards that have flip sides, vehicles that have flip sides, are only legal as their vehicle flip side. And like Commander, it is a one singleton format with 40 life to play with. And there is a 21 damage limit on Commander damage, but the Commander damage must only be dealt by your vehicle and only when it is crewed by your vehicle's pilot. No other pilot will count. There is also an extensive ban list, which is basically all of the cards that you would consider from Commander's ban list, plus the reserve list, plus a few other things as well. Shurikai Genesis Engine is only legal as a rig and cannot be used as a pilot, even though it does have a numerical value, stuff like this. There's all kinds of little idiosyncrasies to how the format is played here, and explanations for all of the bans here as well, and a watch list to let you know which cards are probably gonna be on the chopping block at some point. Shurikai Genesis Engine is super powerful, so there's thoughts of getting rid of that. Parhelion 2 is super powerful. Thunderhawk Gunship is super powerful. A lot of these cards you would end up stumbling upon anyway, and it's like how... Do you remember when Oathkeeper came out and everybody realized that affinity for artifacts on a spell made it to where you could play, say, a Tezzeret commander and put Thoughtcast as the spell, and you could dig through your entire deck at lightning speed and nobody could stop you? This is to prevent stuff like that from happening. I think people realized as soon as Oathbreaker got opened up to general audiences, everybody just collectively broke the format, putting tutors and super draw engines as their signature spells. As noted game designers have said in years past, players, given the chance, will optimize the fun out of your game. And that's one of the things we're going to try to avoid on this channel. But I figured just introducing the pilot format to you would not be enough. We are going to also show you a pilot deck, and this pilot deck is the one that I came up with, combining Bellow, Bard of the Brambles, with the Indomitable. Let's get into it. The Indomitable is the vehicle for this pod racing deck, and it says whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. It's also a 6/6 ship with trample in its own right. We can cast it from the graveyard as long as we've got 3 or more vehicles or pirates, so that will sometimes become important. Bellow, Bard of the Brambles, on the other hand, is a powerhouse commander in his own right, and he turns all of our non-equipment artifacts and non-aura enchantments with mana value 4 or greater into 4/4 elemental creature tokens. Well, not tokens, but elemental creatures that have indestructible haste, and when they touch an opponent, we get to draw a card. Hopefully, you can kind of see the synergy we're going for here. We're going to end up drawing through our entire deck very, very quickly with this aggro strategy, and we are going to be running a very high risk of burning out because we can draw so many cards so damn quickly. But let's go over the main strategy of the deck. We are going to be getting some big creatures on the board and using them to our advantage. Big creatures like, say, Unnatural Growth, which will become an 8/8 creature when Bellow transforms it. So this gives all of our creatures double power and double toughness at the beginning of combat. So we convert all of our enchantments into creatures and then convert their power and toughness into 8/8. Cybership is already an 8/8, which we can convert to a 4/4 with Bellow. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we put the top 2 cards of their library onto our battlefield as 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures. Bellow will then see these Cybermen and turn them into 4/4s going forward, and then Unnatural Growth will double that to 8/8s. We also have Simulacrum Synthesizer, which allows us, anytime we play an artifact with mana value 3 or greater, of which we have 17, many vehicles, then we get to make a 0/0 colorless construct creature that gets 1/1 for every artifact we control. Bellow will turn these into 4/4s, and of course, they will still get 1/1 for every artifact we control. Nettle Cyst cannot convert on its own, but it can make any of our creatures significantly large. Furnace Hellkite has affinity for artifacts and can get fire breathing as well. The fact that this just comes down super easy is the reason why it's been included. And Broodstar has affinity for artifacts as well and has power and toughness equal to the number of artifacts we control, making these very, very, very large creatures. We're also going to add some evasion into the deck to make sure our artifacts and enchantments can punch our opponents. A Levitation, which will itself animate with our commander's ability. Wonder, which will give all of our 4/4s flying until, as long as we have an island. And Cyberdrive Awakener, which will turn all the artifacts we have into flyers. And whenever it enters the battlefield, it will give all of our artifacts 4/4 and creature status if Bellow is not on the board. Then we have a few modal cards as well. Artificer Class, which ramps us a little bit, then allows us to get an artifact from the top of our deck, and then allows us to start making token clone artifacts on our board going forward if we keep leveling it up. Deluxe Dragster allows us to cast cards from our opponent's graveyards, and Spiked Corridor allows us to take non-combat damage and add 2 to it. Also, it allows us to create a bunch of 1/1 creatures if we need to, which can then become pilots in their own right if we end up in a situation where we need that. All in all, this means we are going to have an aggro-based strategy where we put lots and lots of 4/4 items on the board and use them to great advantage, drawing through our deck at lightning speed and controlling our opponents. Well, I'll get into that. We need to talk about some of the draw this deck is using aside from the 2 commanders, and then we will move into a little bit more that the deck is doing. Let's talk about draw. We have plenty of draw in the command zone with our pilot and our vehicle, so let's go ahead and talk about Glorious Sunrise as our first draw card. We can use this to give all of our creatures 1/1 and trample until end of turn, and this happens at the beginning of combat, so we can stack it on top of Bellow, transforming all of our stuff into 4/4s. We can also use it to ramp, we can also use it to draw cards, we can also use it to gain life. It's a very, very modal card, and it solves a lot of problems we might run into otherwise. Weatherlight lets us grab historic cards from the top of our deck, which are sagas and of course artifacts. Bident of Thassa is another copy of our commander's ability, drawing cards when our creatures attack. Rishkar's Expertise draws us based on the greatest power of a card we have, and Return to the Wild Speaker also does the same thing, but it can also give all of our vehicles 3/3 until end of turn, which can be used to close out games. Then we have Thought Monitor, which can draw us 2 cards when it touches the board and has affinity for artifacts. Very easy to hit in a deck with a lot of artifacts. But we do have to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that you could put a Labman in this deck if you wanted to, and that would be really, really bad. You could just draw through your entire deck very quickly with a deck like this. And since, as of right now, neither Laboratory Maniac or Thassa's Oracle are on the ban list, this is something this deck could dig through really quickly if you want to be a degenerate. I am choosing not to do that, so we're just going to move into the removal and interaction packages to talk about being a control player, because that makes you not a degenerate, but Thassa's does. For an 80-card format, we are running a somewhat hefty 12-card removal and interaction suite because we plan on drawing into all of these most games. So let's go and talk about the first one, Magmatic Galleon. This enters the battlefield and deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls. And if one or more creatures an opponent controls are dealt excess damage, we make a treasure token. So the magnetic galleon just comes down, blows up a thing, and then gets reanimated, gets animated by Bellow. We're also going to run Offer You Can't Refuse, Disruption Protocol, Negate, Wash Away, and Counterspell as our counter spells to protect our board state. Let's have some modal removal in Abrade and Untimely Malfunction to get rid of artifacts or do things like deflecting SWAT cards. We also have Return to Nature to get rid of artifacts, enchantments, or exile cards from graveyards. Nautiloid Ship can get rid of graveyards as well, and it has another triggered ability when it deals combat damage to a player. You can put any creature card exiled with the ship onto the battlefield under our control. Chaos Warp and Beast Within can get rid of any type of permanent on the board, allowing us to get rid of pilots, vehicles, lands, anything we may run into. This is a format that seems to be more combat focused and therefore will suffer more from Glacial Chasmitis. So any card that can get rid of Glacial Chasm is going to be very, very important. And let's talk about something that Bellow decks tend to work really well with, and that is board wipes. This is also a very artifact-heavy format, so the type of board wipes we are using are going to favor removing artifacts. So Vandal Blast gets rid of any artifact we don't control, so a vehicle we don't like, or all artifacts we don't control, so all of our opponents' vehicles, which it's a pilot format, so there will be many of them. Fade from History can do the same thing, giving everybody a 2/2 green bear so they can't be mad at you for you blowing up their vehicles. Bane of Progress blows up all artifacts and enchantments, and also puts a 1/1 counter on itself for each permanent destroyed this way, and Blasphemous Act does 13 damage to every creature for the low cost of 1 mana in most situations. Now, it should be noted that because Bellow gives all of our artifacts and enchantments indestructible, cards like Bane of Progress and Fade from History end up being one-sided board wipes in our deck. These will never negatively affect us when we are playing our games, as long as we have Bellow out to protect things like our vehicle Indomitable. And if you find yourself in a situation where you do not have them out and you still want to cast these, remember, board wipes are still board wipes, and it's still a good idea to set your opponents back if you feel like you're backed into a corner. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about mana and ramp. With so many things in the deck costing 4 or more mana, we are going to be running a very hefty ramp package to make sure that we can get to those numbers as fast as possible. So let's begin with Farseek. Search your library for a plains or an island or a swamp or a mountain and put it on the battlefield. We'll supplement that with a Nature's Lore and a 3 visits to grab the deck's dual lands. Of course, if you're on a budget, use tapped dual lands instead of shock lands, but I am running a budgetless deck this time around, so we will be running shock lands. Sakura Tribe Elder can get a basic land out of the deck. Cultivate can get a basic land out of the deck and into your hand. Search for Tomorrow gets a basic land onto the board and makes it untapped. It can also be played on turn 1. Then we're going to be running Hedron Archive, Sisay's Ring, Golem's Eye, and Stone Speaker Crystal. These are all 4 mana rocks, so they get animated by Bellow, and they each have a specific purpose in mind. Cards like Golem's Eye and Sisay's Ring are just generic ramp pieces, but Hedron Archive can draw us when we're in a bind, and Stone Speaker Crystal gives us yet another way to get rid of people's graveyards. This will be an artifact-heavy format, so I am worried about cards like Wake the Past being able to grab all those artifacts very, very quickly. So we need to have answers to when our opponents try to do one of those big swingy turns. Skyshroud Claim gets 2 forests out of our deck, which can be incredibly helpful in a variety of situations, especially since the forests come into play untapped, so sometimes this is just a free card. Nature's Will, since we are a combat-centric deck, will allow us to untap our lands when our creatures deal combat damage to an opponent. And Storm the Vault, whenever one or more creatures we control deals combat damage to a player, make a treasure artifact token, and if we have 5 or more artifacts, this will then ramp itself into the Vault of Catlacan, which gives us blue mana for every artifact we control. They'd fucking busted ass card if we can flip it. So after that, we're going to be talking about the basic lands the deck is running. We are running 30 lands for this 80-card deck. We are running 3 mountain, 3 island, and 3 forest so that our rampant growth style cards can grab them. And then in our dual lands, we are running the searchable dual lands of Breeding Pool, Cinder Glade, Steam Vents, Stomping Ground. Each of these can be grabbed out of the deck with cards like, not rampant growth, but certainly cards like 3 visits and Farseek and Skyshroud Claim. So make use of that format as you are digging through your deck. We're also going to be running non-searchable duels in the form of Yavimaya Coast, Stormcarved Coast, Shivan Reef, Rootbound Crag, Rejuvenating Springs, Carplusion Forest, Sulphur Falls, Spire Garden, Dreamroot Cascade, and Hinterland Harbor. This means we are running as many pain lands and check lands and slow lands as humanly possible, because each of these comes into play untapped in most circumstances. So make sure you have as many of these available if you are playing this deck at a higher power or a faster speed. Though obviously there's a more budget land base you could use if you need, and I've done a lot of videos on how to build those budget bases, so you already have the things you need to solve that problem. In the Omniland section, we'll be running a Command Tower, an Exotic Orchard, and a Ketria Triome so that we can search for the Triome early on with Nature's Lore. And for our utility lands, let's add a Reliquary Tower, a Pit of Offerings for one more way to get rid of things in a graveyard, and Mosswort Bridge to allow us to cast our high mana spells for free, so long as they're in the top 4 cards of our deck with its Hideaway ability. And that's about it for this deck. It's a very simple combat-focused deck that wants Bellow to do its thing and do its thing quickly. But I know that especially with a format that seems new, this is going to be something that might need a little bit of demonstration, so let's do a quick play test and show you how the deck runs so that you can see how to play Pilot. Let's talk keepable hands in this format. You want to make sure that you have the ability to get your pilot or your vehicle online as soon as possible. And for our sake, that means we need to have something to protect our commander, something to make sure that we can ramp into it somewhat quickly. And as long as we've got both of those things, we should be good. As of right now, in this hand, we've got a Disruption Protocol to protect our cards, though we don't have the mana to supplement it. We have a Search for Tomorrow to ramp, and we'll be able to get our creatures out on turn 3. So that's honestly good, being able to have both the pilot and the ship out on turn 4. That's probably where we want to be. So let's go ahead and open up with a draw, play a forest, tap it, and suspend this Search for Tomorrow. Going into turn 2, and we've drawn a Hinterland Harbor. Now we have the ability to do Disruption Protocol when we need it, so we're in a fairly good spot. Let's go ahead and play that Hinterland Harbor, and we don't have any other moves to make, so we're just going to go ahead and pass our turns to our opponents. We hit turn 3, and the Search for Tomorrow grabbed an island out of our deck. Now we're going to go ahead and play a Rootbound Crag so that we have access to all of our deck's colors. The safest card to play is probably going to be the Indomitable, because players are less likely to have the ability to get rid of artifacts. They are more likely to have creature removal in most formats, so we're going to get the Indomitable out early. This will also allow us to protect Bellow on a follow-up turn. So we move into turn 4, and we've drawn a Blasphemous Act. Let's go ahead and play the forest and tap 1, 2, 3, and get Bellow online. Now that he's out, we have a couple of options. We can either tap him in order to crew the Indomitable and swing with the Indomitable, or we can have him transform the Indomitable into a creature with his effect, granting the Indomitable indestructible, but turning it into a 4/4. It's entirely up to you which side you need to go on, and it's also dependent on if you need to protect your board with Disruption Protocol, as you will need to tap the Indomitable in order to cast it. Let's assume for now, though, we just want to draw into some extra cards. So we'll have Bellow animate the Indomitable, turning it into a 4/4. Now that the Indomitable is a 4/4, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we'll draw 1 card for the Indomitable's effect and 1 card for Bellow's effect. And since we've given up the ability to protect our Bellow or our Indomitable by making that play, let's go ahead and cast the Nature's Lore we grabbed from our deck and get a tap land out so that we don't draw that tapped land. We move on to turn 5, and we pulled a Ketria Triome out of the deck, like I said, and we've got plenty of basics, so we can go ahead and play Cinderglade on the board. Now we've got a pretty interesting scenario ahead of us. We can start overcommitting, but I think the most important thing to do at this point is make sure that we've always got the mana available to protect our stuff. So let's go ahead and play and assume that we've only got 4 mana that we can spend on any one thing. And whenever you're playing Commander, one of your, or in this case Pilot, one of the best practices you can make is leave as high colored mana open as possible so that your opponents don't know exactly what move you plan on making. If I leave only blue mana up, then they know I've got a counterspell, but if I leave a mixture up, then it's harder to figure out what I'm doing. So let's go ahead and tap 4, and let's get the Spiked Corridor out on the board. Spiked Corridor allows us to make a bunch of 1/1 gremlins, which we'll be able to use on follow-up turns. Now we're going to tap Bellow to crew our Indomitable so that the 4 damage it does to an opponent will end up spilling into commander damage. We don't need blockers as we've already got a bunch of devils up ready to do that. So the Spiked Corridor will be able to swing and the Indomitable will be able to swing. Assuming that only 1 or 2 of them make it through, then we're going to draw just 2 cards off of this. They both have indestructible, so they'll survive this, and we're going to end up having to discard down at the end of here. So I'd say in this situation, we are least likely to need this island. And let's go ahead and assume that our opponents did cast something on their turn that we need to Disruption Protocol to protect our board state. Now we move into turn 6, and let's go ahead and shock in that breeding pool. Now, we can be a little more willy-nilly with our turn. I think the correct move for us to make will be to set our opponents back. So let's go ahead and go into combat, animate the Indomitable, and swing with the Indomitable and our Torture Pit. This will allow us to draw, let's say again, only 1 of them makes it through, drawing us 2 cards. After this, we're going to pay 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're going to put Bane of Progress out on the board. This is going to blow up every single artifact and every single enchantment on the board except for ours. And let's say our opponents each had their vehicle out, and then 1, 2, 3 for each mana rock they probably had, giving us an 8/8 Bane of Progress. We don't have the mana to cast anything else, so we just sit here knowing that we've wiped everybody's board, and we are sitting pretty. We move into turn 7, and we've drawn an Offer You Can't Refuse, which is perfect for us to hold up mana for. As of right now, we want to hold up mana for Chaos Warp and Offer, giving us 5 mana we can spend on other cards. We just wiped out people's boards, so maybe Nautiloid Ship is the move we need to go for. Or we could go ahead and be a little greedy and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and let's get the Cyberdrive Awakener out. This will go ahead and give all of our artifacts haste and flying due to the combination of Bellow and the Cyberdrive Awakener. So when we move into combat, we can go ahead and swing with a Flying Indomitable, which is crewed by our commander. We can swing with Cyberdrive Awakener, and we'll be able to swing with a non-flying Spiked Corridor. This will mean that we have a guaranteed 2 creatures hitting, drawing us 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. With 3 mana available, a Chaos Warp and an Offer You Can't Refuse in hand, the best thing we can do right now is discard down and not try to build too much more threatening presence on our own side. So let's get rid of the Carplusian Forest and the Cultivate, and we don't really need the Bident of Thassa as we're so far ahead, so we can safely get rid of that, keeping our utility cards on the board. Moving into turn 8, we'll call this the penultimate turn of the game. Star-Carved Coast comes down, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. Sisay's Ring comes down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nautiloid Ship comes down. We can get rid of a player's graveyard, and now we can start eliminating players. We're holding up 2 mana for Negate, or Offer You Can't Refuse if we need to, but at this stage, we can go ahead and swing in with everything. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of these have flying, and this is still a lot of damage in general coming at somebody's face. We've probably eliminated a player at this point, and we're probably going to have to pay 2 mana to negate a fog if that happens. And with all these creatures making contact, we'll draw a lot of cards, setting us up for following turns to square with whatever opponents are left. All in all, it's very close to how Commander is played, but with a few key differences that will shape the way that you end up enjoying the format. And, well, I'd talk about deck upgrades, but this is already a budgetless deck, so I guess I'll just talk about my final thoughts, and that's that as a supplementary way to play Commander, I think this is fun. If you bring 1 or 2 pilot decks to an otherwise Commander night, maybe you'll have 1 or 2 games that you'll be able to enjoy that end up being sufficiently different from your normal Commander games. My only hope is that we don't go the same route of Oathbreaker and have everything just kind of break on itself. That's my hope. That's my want. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let me know if you want me to cover more pilot stuff in the future. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.